everyone, welcome back to the makeup chair. Today I'm talking all about eyebrows, and I feel like I've done a lot of videos about brows, but I still get a lot of questions. So we are going to go back to basics. I'm going to talk you guys through all the things you can get done to your brows, who I recommend them for, how to grow your brows, how to shape your brows, and also the 3 ways that I like to fill my brows in. So let's get started. So the very first thing that I want to cover, and this is for my makeup artist guys and girls out there who are training to be makeup artists and using my videos to help them when learning and practicing and then going out and getting your own clients. Love it. Love being part of your makeup story. But this one is in particular for you guys because we all have a certain way that we like to do brows. Makeup artists typically have a routine that they do for pretty much everybody, and it doesn't go too far away from the way that they do their own brows. I have a few different techniques that I like to do on different people, but you have to make sure you're checking in with them to make sure it's something they're comfortable with. There is nothing worse than you doing all this work for a client, getting their brows to be the best of the best, making it perfect for their eye shape, for their face shape, and you knowing that it works for them, and then them looking in the mirror and getting a complete shock and not liking their brows. You just have to remember not to take it personal. Everybody has a certain image in their head of how they want to look when they have their makeup on, so don't take it to heart if somebody doesn't like the way that you do brows. Make sure you're catering for that particular person. You kind of always know when you have someone who's a little bit tricky, but sometimes it'll kind of blindside you, be like, whoa, I've done their brows perfectly, but they don't like it. Don't take it to heart, learn your techniques, make sure you're picking up on their reaction properly, and check in with them throughout the process just to make sure that they're gonna like them. So that's one thing for makeup artists to kind of bear in mind, but for everybody else, I always recommend getting your brows done for a special occasion, getting them professionally shaped beforehand, and that way you have more control over the way that your brows look, because your makeup artist isn't going to move too far away from the natural good shape that you already have. And there's so many different things that you can get done to your brows. It's the same way as getting stuff done to your hair. So you have your waxing, which I actually can't do because it breaks me out. You have your threading, which is using like string to like basically pluck the hairs away. I find that doesn't break me out. I prefer actually plucking for my own self. So there's like the 3 main ways of getting the hairs gone. The only thing is, if you're a little pluck happy and you tend to have a magnifying mirror and you just pluck, I would actually recommend investing and giving your brows to a professional so that they can get the shape for you, so you are not going to go overboard and get those brows to disappear. I had the craziest, tiniest brows, and what I did is I didn't go near a mirror. I filled them in, but I didn't pluck them. Even when the hairs were like so obvious and they needed to be plucked, I left them alone for a good month, and then for 2 months after, I was very, very careful about the areas that I would pluck. So I'd only pluck like down below this area, and then the odd hair that would be like up here, but I left the whole shape around my brows alone completely for about 3 months. So it took about 3 months for my brows to gradually grow back. I just used to sit there and every 2 days just pluck. I read it in an article once that you should pluck your brows every 2 days, and I'm like, oh, I don't have enough growth like that, but some people do and I don't, and I followed the instructions and got it all wrong. So try to make sure you're taking every piece of advice you get on brows with a pinch of salt, because not everybody's brows are the same, not everyone's growth is the same, so bear that in mind. Now, if you have overplucked your brows and you're trying to grow them back, tinting is a great way to bring a little bit of fullness to the brows, because what tinting does is it basically dyes any of those tiny little hairs. I mean, we have hairs all over our face. If we apply the tint all over, we'd have one big eyebrow across our entire face. If you get them tinted, you'll be able to see those little hairs a lot more, and this will give you a much fuller brow. So if you're trying to grow them back, try to stick to getting them tinted rather than plucked or shaped in any other way. If you're a little bit worried about getting them tinted, you can get semi-permanent tinted instead. There's lots of different brands out there. Maybelline have one. It's basically a gel you just paste on. Once it dries, you just then peel it off, and it will last you maybe like a week. You can also buy the permanent ones from the drugstore, so bear that in mind. You don't want to get them confused unless you're 100% sure about the shape and the color that you're trying to create with your tint. So aside from removing and adding in the brows, you want to make sure that the shape also works for you. So I'll talk you guys through the way that I like to do mine. I have my little brow brush here. So what I do is I start my brows right in here. So see this little area that the brush sits in? It's the little dimple of the nose. You just want to place your brush in there and then have a nice smooth line up, and that's where I start my brows. Now what I used to do is I used to start my brows out here, and what this did is it actually opened up this inner part here, pushed my eyes really far apart and made my nose look bigger. So it's something to kind of consider if you are trying to broaden your nose or open your eyes. You can start your brows out just a little bit further and that can do that for you. If you want to thin off your nose, however, start from a little dimple or even from the top of the nose to really bring those eyebrows together. Now, personally, I prefer the dimple. I feel like this is as far as you want to bring in your brows, but it's, again, super personal choice. And then when you're doing the edge of your brow, you just take your brush, line it up with the edge of your nose, edge of your eye, and that should be pretty much where your brow stops, okay? So you have your start line, your stop line, and then it's the same with your arch. So whether you have a soft, smooth arch, a round arch, or a very defined arch, you wanna line your brush up with the edge of your nose. You wanna look straight on in a mirror and just line that through the pupil, and that will be where your arch is. Now your arch has to be the highest point of your brow. I cannot stress that enough. And I see a lot of people with a straight line from here to here and then bringing it down. What that does is it creates this shape. We don't want that shape. We want it to slightly elevate in that area to lift the eye ever so slightly, and then it can kind of do whatever it wants on the outer edge. But your arch is your arch for a reason. It has to be one hair higher than this part in here. Okay, please bear that in mind because I see a lot of beginners doing very straight brows and it doesn't work for them. You have to have that slight little edge. Even if you're going for the straightest brows possible, they have to be on a slight edge so that there's a little tiny bit of a lift. I promise you, try it. Make sure that this is lower than your arch. Your arch is an arch for a reason. So we've gone through all the information with the brows. Let's move on to how to fill in your brows. I have 3 ways that I like to do it, whether I'm going for super natural brows, whether I'm gonna go for something kind of semi-filled in, or whether I'm gonna go super dramatic brows, which is what I have on right now. 3 different ways, and let's get started. So for this, I actually use a black eyeliner, and this is a super fine black eyeliner. Like it is like the tiniest eyeliner I've ever seen in my life. My friend Chloe got me this. Thank you, Chloe, because it's amazing. Now this is an eyeliner. It's not designed for the brows, but I do use it on the brows, and I believe they have a lot of different colors. I use the black because I have black eyebrows and black hair, so I do use the black, but it's really, really fine tip. Kind of done this side a little bit just so you can see the difference it kind of makes. It just creates a little bit more of an even look for your brows, but it's not necessarily about heavily filling them in. I just want them to look a little bit more polished, a little bit more perfected, and all I'm going to do is create little hairs that mimic the hair beside it. So if you're missing a couple of little areas, all you want to do is follow exactly the same shape of the hair closest to that area and do a little line and just very slowly build it up. But because this is a very natural look, you want to make sure you're constantly like moving back from your mirror, making sure that you have the shape that you want, that you're not overdoing it. Great thing about this liner is it's extremely long lasting, can't smudge or anything like that, and it just tints the skin for you, and it comes off with eye makeup remover. You can see it just creates a little bit more fullness, but it looks extremely natural because you can still see my skin showing through, and that creates that really natural brow look. Love that technique because it creates a really polished finish. It's great for TV work. It looks really natural up close, so it's great for camera work as well. Works on both guys and girls, whether they wear makeup or they don't wear makeup. It's one of those great ones. Now this next one is typically what I wear every single day. Softly filled in, still has a little bit of the skin showing through, so my brows don't look heavily filled in, but still nice and defined. So what I do is I take a bit of brow gel, and I take this brush, which is by Blank Canvas Cosmetics, is the E06. It has a spoolie on one side and an angled brush on the other. Put a little bit of brow gel on the spoolie. I brush through the brows, and I do one brow at a time because what I like to do is just to make sure that the gel has not set so that I can go straight in with the powders and then they all set together. I like to just brush them up and give them a little bit of a feathery feel. And then what I do is I take my other side, I put a bit of gel on this as well. Then I use brow shadow. Now I use a black, and sometimes I mix in a little bit of brown in that as well. This is just a matte black. On the back of my hand, I just squash it down to make sure it's nice and smooth. And what I tend to do first is just run through the brows in the areas that I really need to. And then because I want a little bit more of a filled in feel for my brows, I actually fill in this underneath part along here, working up towards the arch, and then down on the other side. So basically the under part of the brow. And I do exactly the same thing at the top. The only thing is I don't start in here. Like when I was working underneath, I started in here, worked all the way across. I actually start just here. So leaving this little area here, just right there, start right there, and then work up towards the top, along the edge and down to meet the V at the end. Then I work in quick little strokes, just blending that through, and then just repeat on this side. I actually like to start off with my bad brow. So this is my bad brow, this is my good brow. So I kind of figure out the shape that this is gonna go in because it's hit or miss with this particular brow. And then with this one, I know that I can manipulate it to make sure that it matches with the other one. So that technique gives you this really nice defined sort of a look. It's not too heavy, but you still have that polished finish. This next one then is the brow look that I have on today. For that I use these two brushes. Now this is from the marble brush set. You have your flat brush, which is great for carving out the brows. This is your little concealer brush, and then you also have your angled brush as well. So both of these come in a brilliant set which has pretty much everything in it. I'll put in the description box where you can get this awesome little set. What I love about these two is that you can really flatten them out. Like you push that down and it is like super fine. So it's great for really carving out the brows. Same with the angled brush. You can really push this down and get that perfect little feathery strokes through the brows. It's amazing. What I love about this brush is how much I can flatten it down. Now you might ask, why can't you just get a brush that's already super thin? I don't like super thin brushes because it doesn't give you the same control that you get from a brush like this that's slightly bigger that you can then flatten down to get that perfect edge. You don't get that from a brush that's already super flat. It doesn't have the stability, it doesn't have the support behind it to give you that smooth line. It'll end up flopping and moving around a little bit, whereas a brush like this that still has a little bit of movement in it, I can push it down, manipulate it into a super fine line and get that perfect little shape, and then it'll also start to open so I can kind of feather it through the brows and blend it as well. So it's just a perfect brow brush. So I use my angled brush in the same way I've been using this whole time. Take a little bit of brow gel. I take my black eyeshadow and then I basically squash it down as flat as I can get it, or sometimes even like between my fingertips. And then I can create the smooth lines that I want. Now, if I want to go for super bold brows, I do it in the same way as I did the last one, where I basically start here and I run it through the bottom of the brow. So you end up with a defined line just underneath. I then do the same at the top, but as I said before, we don't start here like we've done underneath. We start a few hairs in from the top, and we do exactly the same thing, just creating an outer edge line. And then create really fine lines working from the base of that line that we created, working upwards to fill in this intersection. Use the edge of the brush to create those little feathery strokes. Just working like up like that. I then turn the brush on its side and I just push upwards. And what I don't do is I don't flatten the brush at this stage because I want the brush to slightly open, and this will catch the hairs, the natural hairs, and brush through with the product. Once I faded out that line, I then take a little bit more product and I focus on this area out, just in the middle, to create those like really filled in brows, but leave this intersection looking nice and light and barely there, so you can still see the skin showing through. Kind of ombre, but like a really subtle ombre. I don't like really strong ombre either. With the concealer brush then, and a little bit of my favorite concealer, I just pop that on the back of my hand. I pick up a little bit of product on that brush and I just make sure it's nice and flat. So I'll give it a little bit of a squeeze. Just like that, the same way as when I'm doing like my cut crease, basically the same thing. And I'll just go around the brows and make sure they're nice and sharp. This is also a great way if like your brows don't match, you can create more of an even look by concealing out, maybe one's higher, one's lower, you can kind of conceal it out to make it look a little bit more even. And I just run through the bottom of the brows, like really close, super close as you can get it. Sometimes you go over the lines, and you have to go back in and fix it up, especially if you have bad eyesight like I do and you can't see what you're doing. And once you've lined underneath, what I want you guys to do is just take your brush and sweep it down to blend down onto the lid. So whether you've done your eyeshadows or not, just creating this nice sharp line will definitely give you that better finish for your eyeshadows. You just want to make sure you go back over and set it with like a neutral powder, just to make sure that it's not going to crease or anything or move around. And the same at the top. Then I also go around the edges, and what I do is I do like a little wiggle, so I'll place it right beside the brows and then I sort of just glide along, just so I'm getting as close as I can. And then you want to just blend it up onto the forehead. So that's a technique that you see a lot in my tutorials. Works great for a lot of different makeup looks, but for day-to-day it can be a little heavy, so just go a little light-handed with it, or use technique number 2. So that is all about brows. I feel like this needs to be written down. So if you do have any questions though, I'm always here to help. So leave a comment and I'll see you guys in my next one.